You're listening to the Real Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Cass McCrory, and in this podcast, we highlight women in all kinds of businesses. For yourself, someone else, full-time, part-time, overtime hustle, together we will learn from and with one another. And if we get it right, it'll lift us all. Let's get into it. Friends, I'm so excited to introduce you to Elizabeth St. John today. Elizabeth and I have some similarities in our background. Elizabeth came from management consulting and then moved into the industry and is pursuing passion projects. She made some big leaps in mindfulness and purposeful choice in her career and her life. And she shows us what those big tipping points were and the secrets behind what is really a well-cultivated and loved life. I can't wait for you to meet Elizabeth. Let's jump in. Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Elizabeth and I met a couple of years ago now, I think, in women's school with Jen Resiobi, and she's going to be on in a couple of weeks. I'm so excited to talk to Jen too. But so you're a lunar sister.
Yes. And I am so thrilled for the network and opportunity and transformation that provided. So thank you to Jennifer for creating that space for us.
Right. She created a really beautiful space, and we all came with our own stuff, which is true about everybody, right? We always come with our own stuff. I'd love for you to share kind of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. So I love this question. It seems like a straightforward one, but it's actually a question that has given me anxiety in the past because I feel like my answer is not a linear one, but that's actually just human nature and how we are. We're more complex beings than saying, we do this job or this thing. And so really my mission right now in this stage of my life is around helping people and teams and organizations really unlock their passion, potential, their flow, and living more authenticity and productivity with a lot more ease and in life. And the way I'm doing that right now is through my corporate gig as a change management and transformation leader at Cisco, and then also through my mindfulness life coaching business. So all the different toolkits in my toolbox helping me show up in the world in different ways.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So you've got a lot of different things going on. Yes. And I think that that's really great to showcase, because I think sometimes we think that, somebody is this person and then that's it. Like we just see one element of what they're doing. Yeah. I'd love for you to share the different elements of the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, definitely. So I won't say identity crisis. That's a little bit too extreme, but I've always lived between this world of sort of type A, overachiever, A+ student, and then a artistic sort of woo-woo side. And I always felt like those two things were at conflict. And what I'm realizing now, where I am in life and just through my own reflection and personal development process, is that those things aren't at conflict. They're actually perfectly woven together and have brought me where I am today. And so I've lived this journey that's been around, a pretty rigorous climb the corporate ladder, do X, Y, and Z, get these specific results. And on the same token, I've been pursuing an artistic talents on the side. I minored in studio art in college, but again, I always felt like those two things were separate. And so I'm happy that I can reflect right now and look at, everything's kind of tied up nicely in a bow. And so what that really looked like for me specifically was I graduated from undergrad with a degree in communications, and I specifically remember going to the major fair when I was a freshman or a sophomore in college, and okay, well, what do I want to do? I don't really know. And one of the communications professors saying, oh, well, communications degree, you can do whatever you want. So I was like, okay, that sounds good. Like, let's do that. And then I graduated, in all honesty, couldn't find a job, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I ended up going back to graduate school to get my master's in organizational leadership. And so that was a lot of organizational development, human behavioral change, coaching, a lot of work that led directly into my management consulting job at Accenture. And so I spent a little over 10 years on that journey of, change management, human capital. So really driving large scale, enterprise-wide global transformations. And I was on the brink of a promotion to managing director, which is the thing everybody wants if you stick along, in a consulting gig that long. And just looking up and around, I realized that path was not for me. Super love the people. It's amazing path for many people, but looking at the ways you were measured, the type of work that you were doing, or how you were spending your weekends or your time with your family, I just realized this was really at a conflict with what I wanted, and I wasn't sure what that was, but I knew that wasn't it. And so I did a lot of, really dove into my own personal mindfulness journey, and it led me to finding an opportunity with one of my clients who was at Cisco. And so I left Accenture, which was a very hard decision, and joined Cisco as a change management lead in the security business. And that had really opened up the opportunity for me to do what I do really well and without other distractions, if you will. But then it also gave me the space in my personal life to start exploring other opportunities. And so that led to a few things. I realized that what I really wanted to drive, the change I wanted to see in the world, was people just being less stressed out. And, Cass, you do a lot of work in the corporate arena.
Yeah.
So you see that, right? People are working themselves crazy, not, taking the time, taking a beat, not being present. You can just go through your days like doing. And then at the end of the day, just exhausted. What did I even do? Everything was so chaotic. And so from my own mindfulness journey, I was like, this is something that people need to know and need to do. And this is a culture shift that really needs to happen. And so I started exploring that, and actually, I can credit Jen as my coach, our coach, for giving me the boost I needed to putting some serious action around what that meant for me. And so I decided getting my coaching certification was one of the paths that would help me be able to do that well, really drive more mindfulness into not just in the corporate arena, but with everyone. And so I pursue my professional coaching certification. And so now I have also my coaching business. So from a one-on-one coaching, and then also, like I said, bringing mindfulness more into organizations and shifting that culture. And then my last point is all at the same time, which you were part of that journey as well. I started a flower crown party business. And so really, again, kind of having that space to realize, what did I want and love? And my artistic side, my knack for training and helping people tap into their creativity, really led me to this place of, I love flowers. I love creating flower crowns. When I do it with the women in my lives, people just totally light up and have the best time. And so I also started a little side gig around that. So that's my long story of my complicated identity that I have today.
Thank you for sharing all of that, because I think there are a lot of people that are going to be listening to this, because I do work with Accenture closely. And I know that a lot of my network has people that work in management consulting. And having that moment of saying, hey, I'm about to reach a pretty big milestone, and I realize I don't want it. That must have been quite the trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, especially, even just tactically from a resume perspective, right? Hey, if I just hold on 6 more months or 1 more year, my title on my resume, if I want to go find something else, could be that much better. But what it was is my internal guidance system. I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I didn't want to live my days in a certain way. And it's that fear we hear everybody talking about, right? Of taking a leap, doing something else, letting go of this pretty linear and clear career path into something else. And to be honest, Cass, there's also a lot of ego wrapped up in that.
Oh, tons.
Like there, and I had to really, really get clear on what was my true path versus what was my ego saying, hey, you can just do this. It's a better title. You can be really successful here. But my, like I said, my mindfulness journey and my consciousness really showing me what I was good at and what I wanted would not allow me to do that.
How did that manifest within you? I'm curious, because I think some people are like, oh, I've been getting headaches all the time, and I really have a malaise about going to work. And they don't see those things as like signs from their internal guidance system. And I'm curious how it manifested for you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I talk about in my coaching business a lot. It's that autopilot mode, right? We get into this autopilot mode, and even if it might not feel comfortable, it's all we know. And we think that we have to be living in that stress or that rat race because that, that's all that's around us and what we see. So for me, there was a lot of, I would say, energetic fluctuations throughout the day. So I would have a really great moment where maybe I made a great sale or had a great client conversation, and my energy would skyrocket, right? I would feel like I was on top of the world, that I was doing great. And then the next minute, something chaotic would happen. A team member would want to leave. A client was dissatisfied with something. My boss had, something came down the pipe. And then I would have these intense moments of stress. And so it was this fluctuation that really was just exhausting at the end of the day. And so it was always like, gotta go to happy hour, or, I'm traveling for work, so let's get room service. It was whatever I could do to keep distracted from this kind of emotional and energetic yo-yoing that finally just exhausted me. And I'll get really specific on what helped. And Jen, as my coach, was a big part of this, but I don't know. Are you familiar with the Artist's Way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jen introduced that to me, and I will tell you the single biggest thing that really changed my mindset or helped my my conscious awareness of how this wasn't in line with what I was doing is journaling, which sounds super simple and maybe a little trite. And I'm not even talking about, right, you just journal like, hey, my day was great, I did this and this, but it's this stream of conscious journaling. And so as part of that program, every day you have to free form write 3 pages. And it can feel uncomfortable and you're not really sure where to start or what I should say. But what it does is this amazing release of, you start writing the things that are top of mind, but by forcing yourself to go 3 pages, it gets into all of that stuff that you've been ruminating on in your mind but haven't released, and you don't even realize you're spending mental cycles on it. And so just starting writing 3 pages a day, it was like my soul was pouring out of the page, and all these things that were just a couple layers under, but I was too busy, too stressed, too chaotic to really sit down and look at what those were. And so that was the key for me unlocking and getting more clear on, okay, who am I? What do I want? What's not working in my life?
Yeah. We'll link to the Artist's Way and specifically to the morning pages in the show notes, because I completely agree. The morning pages, when you commit to them, it's long enough that it does force you to get outside of the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were talking about, this idea of being an autopilot, I think morning pages really, they let you be an autopilot for like the first page and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then in order to fill that white space, you have to step outside of it.
Yeah. And it's just, I encourage everyone to try it, because you're like, I didn't even know that was a thing I was worried about, or that I have been ruminating on, or that's been bothering me, or that this was a dream of mine, or, oh, I actually want this, right? There's so many interesting pieces there. So yeah, it's something that I highly recommend.
Do you still write your morning pages?
I do. I will say it's not every day, but if something is feeling off, I know it's something I have to go back to. Same with my yoga practice. So it's not something I do every day, but if I start feeling just a little icky or not right, I'm like, oh, I just haven't written in a couple of days. So it is something that I have definitely kept up beyond that. I mean, that was probably 3 years ago that I started that practice, and it's definitely an anchor I come back to frequently.
It is such a good resource for people as they're just even considering the fact, am I in an autopilot space?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that our listeners love is when we get really tactical and talk about how you do life. Would you be willing to share a day in the life?
Definitely. So with I'm still in corporate. I will say consulting is a lot different than being on quote unquote the client side or in industry, because I had probably 3 full-time jobs, it felt like, when I was in consulting, which, by the way, is amazing for some people, right? Like, that world
Yeah.
can be energetic and thriving, and I mean, some people, that is their jam. For me, it was kind of fitting a square peg into a round hole. And so being now in industry, I have, as you can imagine, right, a pretty full calendar. The culture at Cisco is very meeting heavy. And so I, typically have a long day of meetings. But what I try to do is start my day. I will go to yoga some days, other days I'll walk or run or just something in the morning. I try to be very conscious about not looking at my phone or checking my emails before I actually do my workout, have breakfast, do my morning pages, maybe a meditation. Let me be clear, I don't do that every single day, because I think I tried to at one point, or doing anything every single day actually can fall into that, perfectionist world where I found I wasn't giving myself enough grace to be human. And I'm like, these are the things I'm doing to support myself. Why am I giving myself a hard time if I don't get my 10 minutes of meditation in? So that's my caveat, that, none of this is necessarily a strict rule, but I do try, because I do find if I check my phone or check my emails before I'm really ready, that puts my mind in a different space. That is not one that will allow me to really set my intention for the day. So I, do some of that in the morning, and then I pretty much hop into, emails, meetings. I am really intentional about blocking at least an hour of white space during the day. I also, being an entrepreneur and having a couple side businesses outside of my corporate job, I have to be really intentional about not mixing and blending those times, because it's not even that I feel like I'm cheating Cisco by maybe, working on a coaching thing for an hour. It just doesn't sit right with me. And I will, an Instagram post or something like that, but I really reserve my coaching and flower crown business for kind of hours outside of work. That being said, I am not a night owl at all. So after 5 p.m., my brain turns to mush. And so, I live in Austin, and most of my team is in California. And so even with them, like, taking late meetings, I'm pretty good about setting my boundaries that, hey, you're not going to get my best brain power if it's after 5 or 6 o'clock my time. And so what that leads to is a lot of weekend work. But, I've heard this, and I feel cheesy saying it, but the whole, if you're doing something you love, it doesn't feel like work. But honestly, some of my highlights of my week are sitting at a coffee shop, drinking my latte, and working on my coaching business. And whether that's creating content, writing articles, putting offers together, scheduling client meetings, all of that fun stuff. It really is where I'm in the zone and I'm in flow. So I do end up doing a lot of Saturday and Sunday, air quote work for my coaching and my flower crown business.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because when you're pursuing something that lights you up and is a passion, it doesn't need to fit into a container the way that work, and I put that in quotes, does.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you create the container for the work to exist, and still be meaningful and thoughtful. And you're very professionally successful in addition to being really passionate and living a life that you love.
Mm. Yeah, the passion piece is really important to me, and that's something I, talk a lot about in my coaching business and with my clients, is that it feels like there's this overarching sense of you have to find your passion and you have to find your life's purpose, and if you aren't living that, then are you a failure? And so my big thing is, how can we better tap into what are those things that get us excited, light us up, bring energy into our lives? And, the whole idea of flow, right? You're doing something and you lose all track of time. How do we, first of all, recognize what that is for ourselves, not just for, what people think we should be doing or what society says we should be doing. Like, oh, I don't know, people love yoga, I feel like I should love yoga too. No, right? It's like, what is really true for you? And then how do we bring those snippets into your everyday? Because that's something I realized. And, the journey I just mentioned, it's not like I left Accenture and went to, Bali and became a yoga instructor and, totally, which by the way, sounds amazing. I do know people who have done that. But it was more just, how do I get still enough to recognize what are the little things? And some of that started with taking art classes, right? Like studio art has been a major part of my life, but being in my consulting world, I pushed that aside. I put it in the closet and I said, that's not me. That's not my identity. I am a successful corporate person now. And that was totally draining me. And I didn't realize, I think even my boss at Accenture, she's the one who said, hey, I think why don't you take some art classes? Like you need to express your creativity more. And I did. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm coming back to life a little bit. And so there are these daily incremental or weekly things that we can be really intentional about to bring passions into our lives without it having to be something extreme. Because I think that's what scares people sometimes, or what hesitates them from getting out of that autopilot mode, is it feels like it needs to be something extreme. But I guarantee you that's not the case.
I love that you mentioned that, because I do think that people do have this idea of all or nothing. Like, oh, if I'm going to take an art class, that means I'm going to become an artist. And if I'm going to buy a good camera and I'm going to start taking pictures, it means I'm going to become a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
We attach a whole lot of expectations to our curiosity and the pursuit of what we're curious in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what if we just let it be what it is?
Yeah.
What would happen?
I love that. And just taking that step to explore that, right? Like you talk a lot about curiosity, and I see that in so many of the things that you're doing. And I think that's a great frame to think about it through. It doesn't mean it's your new identity, or that you've gone off the deep end trying to do something that your family and friends think you're crazy about, right? It's just, hey, I'm curious about this thing. Let's see if I like it, if it works, if it doesn't. But that's the that's what kind of jerks you out of that autopilot mode, because we can get into this storyline that we're too busy and it's not a priority. And that's how people end up getting, I think, really burnt out and dissatisfied with the day to day.
Yeah, I completely agree. The other thing that I think is really interesting is the propensity for people to want to monetize it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, I like this. I'm good at it. In order for people to show me that they value it, they have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the value has to be monetary. And that's something that I've been learning and kind of reckoning with, to use a Brene Brown word, recently. Is like, I can love doing something. It can be deeply valued by other people, and it doesn't have to have any monetary gain.
Yes, it's the pursuit of your passion or pleasure or endeavor, whatever it is, simply for that itself. And
Yeah.
I think that's hard. I think especially when you look at, our generation or our parents, it was different, right? It was, well, you're doing something to get paid, and it doesn't, that's not necessarily the case. And even if it is something that we want to do, people want to kind of put you in a box, right? So people want to say, well, why don't you just go be an artist?
Right.
And it's, well, I want this to come from a place of love and joy and, heart-centered, kind of freeing place and mindset, not from a place of, oh, but I have to make money and I have to have health insurance and pay the bills and all of those things. So I see that a lot, whereas that's where it's really important just to get clear on you and what works for you. And so, going back to the artist way, I think a big guiding principle there was around create the thing that needs to be created, do the thing you need to do in the world, and then we'll see what happens with that, right? Like if you feel like you want to write a book, but you're more worried about, okay, is this going to, make the New York Times bestseller list, or am I going to make millions from it? Well, then you're in it for the wrong reasons, right? If you feel like you need to write a book, then you need to write the book and get that out of you, not be so worried about what's going to happen. That being said, of course, people need to make money and have health insurance and all of those beautiful
Right.
things. But that's where I'm really trying to lean into this idea that we aren't single note humans, right? We have all of these different skill sets and talents and can be interested in different things and give our gift to the world in different ways. So that's still uncomfortable for me, but it's something that I'm, working on myself, especially when, as you bring up curiosity, right? There's so many things I'm interested in and curious about. Doesn't mean I'm going to go pursue something and then that's going to be the new headline on my resume. Instead, it's just, hey, this is part of my human experience of wanting to explore a new skill set.
Yes. I love what you said. We are not single note humans.
Mm.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, I believe that it's true, but it's hard to, how the human brain works, right? We categorize, we have labels, we make patterns, and we want to do that with people as well. It's easy to say, oh, you're a lawyer, you're a consultant, you're, X, Y, and Z, but it's a lot more complicated than that.
It is. And I think that I'm curious, do you feel like you grew up around people that were defined? Because I did.
Yes, 100%. My mom's a CPA, so that is very, very defined. And my dad was a geophysicist, so that was also quite defined. But both of them still also had interests outside of that, but it wasn't their, primary pursuit.
Yeah. Same, like my dad, he was a farmer. This is the encompassment of what my dad did. It was a million things, but it was this one thing. And I think I kind of always thought, oh, I would have that one thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And if I kind of pump the brakes on that idea of it should be one thing, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I get to live a long, varied life. I get to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you can weave all of those things together in a story that makes a lot of sense. So that's, kind of what I was alluding to at the beginning.
Yeah.
Is I didn't know that was the case. And sometimes it takes people outside of you to recognize that. Like, I mean, growing up as a child, I was always playing teacher, always doing art things. And I look back now and I'm just like, oh, it wasn't an accident that I got a communications degree, or an accident that I ended up in the human capital practice at Accenture, where I was doing a lot of communications and training and strategy setting and a lot of development of team members, right? So this theme of teaching, and even my master's degree, it's a master's in education. So it was at the Peabody School of Education at Vanderbilt, which I was like, oh, a master's of education instead of a master's in business. And now I reflect and I'm like, I'm a teacher. What am I talking about, right? I'm not teacher with a capital T, in a high school, for example, but that's what I do through my corporate world, through my coaching business, and even through my flower crown work. And so it's taken a lot of kind of stepping outside of myself to realize that there is a very clear theme that goes through all of these things, even though they can feel and show up in the world very differently.
That is beautiful. And yeah, I think this idea of there's no accident.
Mm-hmm.
And how you were always doing that as a kid, and kind of what that looks like as an adult is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to talk about your Instagram handle for a second.
Okay.
Because it is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
And clearly one of your values is adventure and travel.
Yes.
Because you take amazing trips.
This is true.
Tell me about how you've prioritized that and what that looks like in your life.
So travel has always been really important to me. My dad was always taking me on different vacations growing up, so got used to being on a plane from an early age, and that the whole travel bug thing is real. I start getting antsy if I don't have a trip plan. And so it is something that I prioritize and also let happen. So, last year I had a lot of trips and they all ended up being some kind of retreat or something that was more reactive, right? It was presented to me and I was like, oh, okay, let's do this thing. But if I don't have that, I have, a few friends that are my ideal travel companions, and it's, hey, we got to get a trip on the calendar. So I think that it is a privilege and a luxury for sure to be able to have growing up with family who values travel and culture, and seeing other parts of the world. And I get a ton of inspiration from being in different areas and being, we talked about that autopilot zone. A huge way to get out of that is to just travel or get out of your daily routine for that matter. So I even try to do a lot in Austin, just things that are out of my typical routine, because it really gets the neurons firing and gets you excited and interested and really deeply in the present moment in a different way than you can in your normal day to day. So yeah, my travel journey is just really a combination of kind of proactive and reactive. I have places that I love and then places that I want to explore. And it's interesting, I don't have a bucket list per se, but there's one thing I really, really want to do, and that is to see the Northern Lights, which I haven't done yet. But yeah, everything else just happens a little bit more organically, but I've got to figure out how to see those Northern Lights at some point.
Yeah, that's on my list as well.
Yeah.
I don't have like a formal bucket list, but I do have a number of places that's like, oh, I need to do that in my life. That needs to happen, in Northern Lights around there. You just touched on this idea of really taking breaks. And a couple of days ago, a week or so ago, you mentioned this, are your breaks actually counterproductive? And this is on Instagram again. And I'm just going to say your handle now so that people can go and look at this post. It's elizabeth.saint.john. Saint is an ST. Talk more about what it means. Yes, vacations are kind of a longer form break, but how do you suggest, your clients, especially in the corporate world, how do they take advantage of a different kind of caliber of break?
Yeah. So this one really spurred from a place of, during the work day, we will say we're taking a break, but that ends up being scrolling social media, checking our emails. For me, it usually ends up eating lunch because, kind of working in different time zones and having meetings all day. But what you're doing is really you're kind of perpetuating that autopilot mode, and you're not giving your brain a break. You're not giving that, kind of left brain analytical side a break to relax and experience and expand what that right, more creative side of your brain needs. And so when I talked about in that post and the importance of a mindful break, it's how can you do something that is tactile or immersive or expansive or really touches on the five senses in a different way than is your brain reading and processing. And so, during the regular workday, that can look like, let me go for a really quick walk or walk around the office or do some stretching or maybe meditate. Just something that isn't continuing to activate your brain in the right way, because then you're continuing to I stress not in a negative way there, but continuing to stress that part of your brain instead of giving it a break so that when you go back to engaging in work, you're doing it from a fresh place. And so the same can be said about vacations. And I don't know about you, but sometimes vacations can be more stressful than just staying at work, right? So everything you have to do to prepare, all the logistics. I mean, with UCAS, you've got, a large crew to corral. And so you get there and you're all buzzy trying to do all these things and check in. Then you get to the beach and it's like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to now sit here and relax? Like, no, what's the thing I'm going to write, or what am I going to read, or what am I going to do? So it can be hard for people to really let go. And so my biggest tip there, which many of mine do, comes back to mindfulness, right? So being super aware of what you're actually doing at that moment, which sounds simple, but as you probably know, right, it's really hard for us to do because our minds are either thinking in the past or thinking about, what's coming in the future. And so a really good way to do that is just noticing, observing. And I think this is where my artistic background comes into place, because as an artist, you really have to deeply see and observe in order to translate. And so I often have to kind of put that filter on myself. And let's say we are in the scenario where you're sitting at the beach, just taking a minute and saying, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? How does my skin feel? What is actually happening in the present moment? And then I actually just, I think the last night I just posted something on LinkedIn from the Potential Project that was around checking your email on vacations, and that 70% of people, workers, check their work email on vacation. And I can see why. It's that autopilot, it's that habit. We want to make sure everything's okay. But that is exactly the kind of mental trigger that gets us into a place that is not actually what's happening around us. And so, that's a worthwhile practice anytime, even if you just take 10 minutes during the day, during your work day, to take a break and say, okay, what's happening in the room? What's the temperature? How does my body feel? How do I slow down my thoughts? What am I really thinking about? How do I bring it back to the present moment?
That is like a prescription for everybody that is listening to this, either on their way to the office or while they're multitasking something else. Take that moment and just check in and say, what is the temperature in this space? How does my body feel within it?
Mm-hmm.
That is
even
such
even on your morning commute, right? Like, talk about autopilot mode. You can get from point A to point B without even realizing you were in the car. And so challenging yourself to notice, like, what's something new I haven't seen, on this commute. And just that awareness is the perfect way to really get you in the moment. It sounds so simple, but even mindfulness being a huge part of my life, it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but I invite everyone to give it a try.
I love that. What tactical thing do you do each week that brings you just joy, pure joy, you do it only for the joy?
That is an excellent question. I have 2 pugs, and so I purposely spend a lot of time in the backyard with them, just playing. I mean, we don't have to get into the whole art of grounding, but being in the grass with your shoes off is an important part of my week. And so doing that with my dogs is absolutely something that, if you're in a funk or just need an extra boost, babies and dogs, right?
Yeah.
As they say. Yeah. So that's something, and especially I've been doing so much traveling lately for, work and personally, it's easy to let some of that stuff go, but that'll get you back into the moment for sure.
I like that you talked about this idea of grounding a couple of times. And I had read a book about grounding, and I'm going to link it in the show notes because I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And then recently I planted sage all around our house because I wanted to dry sage so I can have my own sage for my woo-woo rituals that my kids just love. So I'm taking it to the next level, and I'm growing my own sage.
Impressive.
And yeah, it's going to either die or live, one or the other, and either one. But as I was reading about the sage, in order for it to spread, what you have to do is you have to put a growing agent along one of the longest stems in that bush. And then you pin it down to the ground. And then that stem will grow roots.
Mm.
And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking about what happens for me when I lay down on the ground and how I grow roots, not just from my feet, but like whole chakra body self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what comes out of it is really different than even if I'm just standing upright in the grass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. There's so much to learn from just witnessing ourselves.
Yeah, and doing something like that, again, beyond the whole grounding theory, which, like you said, there are books and books about, and we live so much in our minds, right? In this mental place. And so just doing something like you just described and bringing yourself back into your body, and then the next level is actually in tune with the energy of the planet, right? I think we forget we're on a living planet that obviously has energy, and that not being a scientist who wrote the grounding books, right, that definitely impacts us and our energetic field and all of these things. And so I think the trick there is noticing it, right?
Yeah.
So just that little tiny bit of consciousness when you're walking around with your shoes off or laying in the grass, like you said, just thinking about, oh, what am I doing right now? Like, how is this impacting my body? Definitely changes things. So I love that. And yeah, even your analogy with the sage, right? We're just beings and on this with cells like plants and all that other stuff on this earth. And so yeah, it makes sense that we would be affected in a similar way.
Yeah. That there's power in that. I'm not exactly sure how to bring it out, but I think there's something there. I'm going to plant that seed to think about it more.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, I've got a number of rapid fire questions we'll get into.
All right.
What is your go-to jam when you need to up your energy?
So it's so random, but flashback to my high school days. I think it's Jimmy Eat World. It's that it's like, just take some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Do you remember this one?
Yes.
Am I totally crazy?
In the middle. Yes. It's one of my favorites. We sing it all of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it's not even like my type of typical music, but the lyrics of that song are just such a nice reminder. So that's definitely, if I'm feeling any kind of funk, that's where I go.
In the middle. I love it.
Yes.
What time do you wake up?
Between 5:30 and 6:30, depending on yoga schedules.
What's breakfast look like?
Either some form of eggs and avocado or a protein, kale, apple, banana, other weird thing smoothie. All the goodness, just shove it in the Vitamix and see what comes out.
Coffee or tea?
I'm gonna have to say both. I'm actually not I don't drink coffee first thing in the morning, maybe like an afternoon latte, but yeah, kind of nice. On the line of both of them. Morning person or night owl? Definitely morning person.
What is a book you've given the most?
I would say The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Mm-hmm. So have you read that book?
I haven't, but it's on my list.
Oh my God. I read it. I read it in, I think, a day. It's just one of those, like, everyone in life needs to know this. So that's for sure my top one for now.
Awesome. What can someone do to help you feel appreciated?
Being in a situation now as a coach and hearing when people actually share with me how something I supported them with or something I said or something I posted actually impacted them does wonders, right? Because I do a lot and it's sometimes, does anyone care? Is this helping anyone? And just hearing at all that something I did or said or supported helped someone is an amazing, it goes a long way.
Nice. Words of affirmation. Love it.
Yep. Yep.
Where can people find you online?
So yeah, my Instagram handle, like you said, is at elizabeth.st.john. And my website is elizabethstjohn.co, not .com. That will take you to a lovely fashion site where you can buy some dresses. And if that's what you're into, go for it. But yeah, those are the two main spots.
Awesome. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing so much goodness. Thank you.
Yes, I'm excited. Thanks, Cass.